Welcome to Babes in Bookland, your favorite book club podcast that focuses on women's stories. I'm your host, Alex Franca. Today, we're diving into the memoir, Nice Girls Don't Win, How I Burned It All Down to Claim My Power by Parvati Shallow. It's a memoir that is equal parts spiritual excavation, survival story, and a love letter to the messy, complicated business of becoming yourself. You may know Parvati from her legendary run on Survivor, but this book is about something much bigger than a game. It's about a woman who spent decades performing for everyone around her and what happened when she finally stopped. My friend Diliana joins me to talk childhood trauma, cults, shame spirals, the 4 F's, and ultimately, what it really means to win. Hi, Dee.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming back.
Again.
Yes. It's good to be here with you in this space. So thank you.
Anytime.
What did you think of Parvati's book?
Well, at first, I was very intrigued by the title. And Nice Girls Don't Win. I thought that was a great title. And I feel that, like a lot of women, we are trained from a very young age to be a nice girl. And so immediately I was like, oh my God, what is this book about? And I read the book and it was everything I thought it would be and more. It was very relatable. I didn't know that much about her life. I knew a little bit about her through her TV shows, but I haven't watched them. So yeah, it was just kind of like a blank slate for me. I was just going in not knowing anything, and I was very inspired by it.
Yeah, it was a really fascinating journey. I also had no idea about her childhood. I actually didn't even know her from Survivor. I had stopped watching Survivor by the time she left her mark on that show, but I had started watching Traitor Season 2. And it's funny the reputations that people carry with them. And she talks about the reputation that she got while being on the show and how that sort of morphed and changed as she returned to Survivor, which we'll get into. But at the end of the podcast, I do want to revisit this question, can nice girls win? Because I'm with you where, how do you want to define the word nice, right? Is it this patriarchal, puritanical condition that we try to impose upon young girls way more than we impose upon young boys? That's just a fact. I don't think anybody can argue that. But if you choose to be nice and kind throughout your life, can you still win? These are the questions, and we'll ponder as we make our way through this episode. Parvati's memoir was published in 2025, and this is her dedication. For my daughter, Amma, thank you for turning my Titanic around. Okay, so let's start with our quick topics. Parvati is known for her appearances on Survivor. Like I said, she won Survivor Micronesia Fans versus Favorites in 2008. And she actually recently just won her second game, last year's Australia versus the World. She's the third 2-time Survivor winner ever. And season 50 is airing. Go Parvati. I also watched a little bit of this Traitor Season 2, like I said. Full disclosure, I didn't finish that season. Personally, I like the Traitors when there are normies on there. I don't necessarily like to see the same reality show celebrities recycled on all of these shows, but I do like the Traitors. It's very fun. She wore a lot of cute headbands. Quick topics. Parvati's name. Parvati is a prominent Hindu goddess that means daughter of the mountain and is widely known as the divine mother of the universe, symbolizing power, energy, love, and devotion. And we'll get into why Parvati was named Parvati very soon as we deep dive. But I think Diliana is a beautiful name. It's a very unique name in America. You are an immigrant. So is Diliana a super common Bulgarian name? Is it like Emily and Rachel and Sarah?
It's like Mary.
Is it really?
It's an old, I don't want to say ancient, but probably ancient because Bulgaria has been around for a long time. It's an old traditional name.
Okay.
And it's pronounced Diliana.
Diliana. It's so beautiful. Diliana.
It's very soft. But yeah, it's a very traditional, pretty, I don't want to say basic, but very common name. And it means it's a plant that you can make tea out of. Again, not super common. Not everyone's having Diliana tea, but it is. If you look it up, it's an herb that you can get and you can boil and drink. It has calming effects.
Love that. Well, you have calming effects, so I think it's a very apt name. And Diliana and I both get into, well, I guess just you get into how you named your sons a little bit. In our last episode, Erica Sanchez's go way back to season 1, and I believe it's episode part 2 that we actually talk about how you came across your children's names. I love me a good name story. All right, let's dive deeper. Okay, so Parvati's story is about overcoming childhood trauma and the effects that that trauma had on her life that she just kind of later realizes and then has to deal with, which is a journey that I think all of us take at different levels. Not all of us experience the type of trauma that Parvati does. Some of us experience even worse trauma. And at a certain point, I think we all come to a point where we realize, wow, this has shaped me to be a type of person that I no longer want to be. It no longer serves me. It actually stops me from having the type of life that I want or the type of relationships that I want. And so this is her sharing her story, reclaiming her power, claiming her power, maybe like she actually says in her subtitle, but also it's sort of a how-to spiritual guidance book a little bit in a way. Very much she's like, this is my story and but she has a couple of educational resources that she shares with us throughout her memoir. And one of them, she talks to us about the 4 F's. And so before we really get into her story, I just wanted to discuss this book that she discovers, quote, after delving into my childhood experiences, looking for answers to why I did certain things that caused more chaos in my life. And that book is Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. In his book, Walker describes trauma types, or 4 basic survival strategies and defensive styles that develop out of our instinctive fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses. He says that those who repetitively experience trauma as kids often learn to survive by overusing 1 or 2 of these 4F responses. We'll get into more about how these play out in Parvati's life in our episode today. But I also discussed these 4Fs in our episode on Melissa Petro's Shame on You, How to Be a Woman in the Age of Mortification, and it's season 2, so check it out if you want a little bit more info. D, would you consider your childhood a traumatic childhood? I don't know why we're laughing about this, but I don't know. It's just funny.
It's funny because I think anybody could be considered traumatic for them.
Sure.
I mean, everybody has a different level of trauma, but everybody has some sort of trauma in their life.
That's true.
I think sometimes it's a little harder to find those traumas when they're hidden, when everything seemed to be so ordinary or normal. A normal childhood a lot of times also has hidden traumas. So to answer your original question, yes, I do think that there were some very traumatic moments in my life that defined who I am now as an adult and that I've had to work through overcoming. First bringing to the surface and then overcoming. Absolutely. So the book really, I mean, as I was reading it, my life is not at all similar to hers, but there were so many, and this just reminds me of how we human beings are so connected and our experiences are so connected and so relatable, even though we have different lives and our experiences could be completely different. Our emotions, our human emotions are very much the same. Yeah, reading her, I related so much reading everything about her childhood. And then from that point on too.
Well, let's get into her childhood. So Parvati grew up in an ashram called The Ranch. Do I call it a cult? It was a cult-like commune for sure. This is where she credits learning the manipulation tactics that made her so successful on Survivor. She writes that both of her parents were seekers, and after visiting a guru, Ma Raya Bhagavate, in their respective cities growing up, they felt called to learn more and followed her to The Ranch. Ma skyrocketed to fame in New York City after sharing that Jesus had visited her and activated her special powers, and that another recently deceased guru had chosen her from beyond the grave as his successor. She claimed she was the direct link to God and would basically lead her followers to enlightenment. And while she incorporated timeless and traditional aspects like breathwork, meditation, and yoga, Parvati writes, a lot of her lectures and philosophies were emotionally manipulative fabrications based on her need to be seen as special, aimed at gaining power and control. But who does this remind you of right now in our society? And here's always my question, like, how do people fall for this, right? Well, Parvati writes, the culture climate of the era supported this kind of seeking. People were disenchanted with the rigid and divisive policies of religious organizations, and there was a growing distrust of government institutions, which is also pretty comparable to like what has been happening in the 10 years. Why do you think, Dee, that people find themselves in cults? I don't think anybody do people call call it a cult while they're in it. I feel like that's because that word has just so much negative connotation. I don't think anybody would say, yes, I'm in a cult. But afterwards, they're like, oh my God, that was a cult, right? How do people find themselves sucked into this place where they give all of their power, their thoughts, their decision-making over to someone else? They relinquish their control really and say, I trust this person implicitly to guide me blindly, basically.
I think people like to be led. I think there's two things that are at play here. I think deep down, people like to be led by others who are confident. And I'm going to make a direct link here to our current president. And I know we don't need to talk politics, but
it happens.
It doesn't have to be, it's confidence that gives people reassurance.
Because they are unconfident in their own life or like feel unconfident making decisions?
Because having a confident leader, it feels good. It feels like you have direction. It feels like there's purpose. And alongside the confident leader is also community and feeling like you're a part of something bigger. I think we all crave community.
Yeah.
Fascinated with cults, and I'm fascinated with, just collectives or communities that sort of have some sort of ideology for people to follow. It's very interesting to me what draws people into that and how they kind of hook you. I think there are, and Parvati kind of goes into that, but there are techniques and tactics that you can, when you have people's attention, you could start slowly communicating certain things to them that make them feel like they need you more and more and more. And it seeps into your existence without you even knowing it. Right? That once the door is cracked open and you allow that in your life, then it just little by little, you kind of find yourself, I think, one day, like, what have I been doing for, 15 years?
Life is really difficult. And if you can put your trust in someone that they're going to make things better for you, that they're going to make things right for you, I understand why people want to do that. The problem that I have is like when that person is blatantly lying, starts saying two very different things, and you don't want to recognize that. That's where I get frustrated. Where is your moral compass when he said the sky is blue yesterday and today he's saying it's green and you're like, you're right, it was blue yesterday and today it's green. It's like the emperor's new clothes or whatever. You know that tale? There's the emperor and eventually he's naked and all these people are like, yes, his new clothes look beautiful. And it's like, no, he's naked. What is wrong with you? How can you be so blind? How would you allow yourself to be so blind? I know there's a lot of fear there, but as someone who's on the outside of something going on right now, I'm just like, man, how are you guys not getting it? I don't know.
It's just because confronting that means completely changing your life, right? Because a lot of times these people have invested so much energy and time
and
money, and that's become their identity. So by the time they start to wake up, they realize, oh, this isn't going to be a little pivot. This is going to be a major redirect, and it's not going to be easy. And as you can, we can talk about Parvati again, but their exit from that cult was not an easy thing.
No, she's clearly still dealing with the ripple effect of that. That's what I think this book is. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back to Parvati. So for a while, everything is okay on the ranch. It's a very idyllic community where people care for one another. And that's the thing too. It's like, it doesn't start off bad. And also this idea of community is a beautiful thing. I mean, I would love the idea of living on a compound where people still have like agency over their own decisions and bodies and whatever, and just take care of one another, like small villages. That seems like a dream, you know? But Parvati writes, they are, quote, willing to sacrifice for the greater good and work together toward enlightenment. But then Ma starts acting.
Ma?
I know. It's always like with a Brooklyn accent, and I'm like, Ma. She starts acting erratically. She asks the community to start working more and give her all of their money. In return, she'll offer spiritual protection. Parvati writes, she hooked into feelings of shame, unworthiness, and guilt and exploited their desire to be, quote, good. Ma knew that when people are stressed and depleted, they're easier to control. Also very comparable to what's happening right now. It's
Ma.
I know. Frickin' Ma. We got a Ma and we got a Pa right now. Like, what's happening? So Ma starts growing even more controlling, saying who can partner with whom. She became abusive, violent. She took people's newborns and adopted them as her own. She demanded that Parvati's family name her Parvati, but her parents were unwilling to give her away. Instead, they escape the commune. And she writes about like them pushing her out the window. It's crazy. But this is very short-lived because her parents don't have a job. or community. They stayed at her mother's parents' house in California, but it was overcrowded due to Parvati's aunt and her children also being there. She had just escaped an abusive relationship. And then weird things start happening. Parvati has to go to the ER with pneumonia. Her father gets skin rashes and can't find work. Her cousin is diagnosed with leukemia, and her parents freak out, feel like Ma has cursed them or they've left her spiritual protection, and they go back after only 4 months.
That hurt. I remember reading that part.
I know.
It was a punch in the gut. It was such a punch in the gut. And that's the thing is once you're in a community once you're isolated in your little community, isolated from the outside world, you are weak. Because then you go into the outside world and it's shocking. You have to be self-sufficient in ways that you have not had to be in a long time.
Right.
And your identity is confused.
Yep.
And you don't have the support of that strong leadership that you're used to relying on. And it's a lot on you.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out. And I felt for them. Like, I remember that part of the book I was like, no, they're going to freak out. It's too hard.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a solution. And of course they went back. Perfect.
That was their solution. But luckily that was also temporary. We will get to that. Parvati makes the case that this stressful time left its mark on her, and even though she's too young to remember it. And she quotes Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, which is a book that actually comes up
A lot.
time and time again in memoirs, because I think it's true. Parvati writes, terror and isolation are at the core of trauma and reshape both the brain and the body. Because of the way our survival instincts operate, traumatized people experience anxiety, numbing, and an intolerable rage. She continues, as I got older, we never talked about the scary stuff. My parents' coping strategy, like many others, was to ignore the bad and focus on the good. But bad things did happen, and I was there. The imprint of fear lived inside me. With no clear communication, I had no context for it. And I know your history. Did you talk about good and bad things growing up? You were raised by your grandparents because of your parents' circumstances. Were you just did you ignore the bad but then the bad seeped out and you were like, I don't know what to do with that?
It's very interesting because there were bad things that happened, but I don't remember talking about the specific incidents that were bad in a way that was to explain or to understand better. What was really talked about, and as I've shared this with you before, so I was raised by my grandmother. My parents were divorced when I was 5. My father was an alcoholic, very abusive. When my parents separated, they also moved both separately to different countries. My father moved to England. My mother moved to Italy, and I stayed in Bulgaria with my grandmother. My mom's mom was raised by her. And she was the kind of woman, very just matriarch. She did everything herself. She was the leader in the whole family. A very intelligent woman, can do a lot on her own, very independent, self-sufficient, but also very controlling and very repetitive. I describe her as a broken record, but everything bad that happened, it would be on repeat, almost subconsciously conditioning me to believe certain things that I carried, and I didn't realize that was happening then. I just turned 40. So I just recently, I think last year, I realized, oh my God, my beloved grandmother, who's my number one in my life, has been, not maliciously, but she's been conditioning me through just her way of venting. She's conditioned me in all these different ways that I've had to overcome. Belief systems that were created in my head that I had to literally discover, recognize, and then find a way to break down
so that they don't
reprogram so that they don't control my decisions, therefore my life and the future that I want to live, right? So yeah, no one ever really discussed things with me in hey, this and this happened. Let's talk about your feelings, or here's how this feels.
So you had to process some pretty dark situations on your own.
Yeah.
At a really young age.
Yeah. Definitely. And I relate to I think more so my grandmother, who was the venting machine. I think I took on the don't talk about it and just look at the good. That was, I think, my coping mechanism was okay, that happens, but I'm not going to compare it to anybody. I have no one else to compare it to. So this is life.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going through. This is my life. So if anything was traumatizing or I couldn't explain, or I would just kind of sweep it under the rug and look at the positive or process in different ways that were not to look at the thing. Ignore.
This memoir is Parvati examining the effect of her childhood trauma and learning how to finally have a healthy relationship with pain, I think. if I were to super narrow it down. So eventually her parents worked together to break out of the, quote, hypnotic trance from the love bombing and the cycle of abuse they were trapped in to tease apart what was real from what was not. They are able to move out of the compound, and little by little, they regained their own voices. But Parvati wasn't ready to let go. The ranch was all she knew, and now in public school, she's just the girl with the weird name. But she writes that she figured out how to make herself popular, to be who they wanted her to be. And this was something that she would continue to do as her family moved around, molding herself into a new character and a new narrative time and time again, learning to fawn over people to win them over, until it seems she no longer knew who Parvati was at her own core anymore. She'll use this tactic, fawning, over and over again, time and time again throughout her life, and of course to win Survivor. Now, Dee, I know that you moved to America. Remind me at what age? Like you were 13.
13.
Yeah. And you didn't know English. You learned it a lot from watching Friends, which is one of my favorite things ever. Every time I watch Friends, I think of you, by the way. How did you cope with being the new kid?
Oh my God. Now I'm reminded of that section when she talks about the fawning.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I think I might have done that.
I mean, it's a great tactic. Let's be real.
I didn't know what it was, but yeah, it's just terrifying. It's terrifying to be the new kid, to not speak the language, to be the outsider. And I know I desperately, desperately wanted to fit in. So naturally, you observe the environment around you and you try to match the energy of the people who you feel are
the alphas.
The alphas.
Mm-hmm.
And you try to sort of, or get in their good graces or attract, or you kind of, again, you match their speech, you match their actions, you become more like them so that they like you. It is a survival instinct. You're just trying to find your pack, right, to go with. That's going to protect you. You're trying to get strength in numbers there. But I do remember reading that part of the book and thinking like, oh man, I didn't realize I was using tactics. And I do remember at the end, maybe not at the end of high school, but I remember reflecting back on my high school days and thinking how there were times where I didn't know who I was, but I was just kind of acting the way I felt I should be in that moment.
Yeah. But you still came out of high school with some really solid friends that you're still friends with today, which is really cool.
Definitely.
You met people who saw who Diliana was and wanted to get to know her. Parvati brings up this idea of shame, right? And you think, well, where does shame come into play? But it's like the more that you are manipulated, the more that they get under your skin, the things that they find out about you or the ways that they make you feel about yourself. It's all so insidious. Like, and it's a slow burn. And then all of a sudden you're on fire.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to get out. I mean, I think for Parvati's parents, Ma wanting the children was such, and some people gave their newborns to her. But like that was the line that all of a sudden her parents were like, whoa, that's fucking weird. And then of course, like we talked about, they went away and then they came back. She has a little sister who I believe was actually born at the ranch. And then I think her little brother was not born at the ranch. It's fascinating like where our lines are and if we even recognize our lines in the sand until it's too late and they've already been crossed. I mean, and yeah, it's just like, in poker, there's this phrase, pot committed, where you've already given so much of your money to the hand and like you're losing this hand unless by a miracle, like on the flop, you get your card. And most of the time you're not. But at a certain point, you feel like you're pot committed. You have to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to hope for the best at that point. And you have to hope that you've been wrong about the signs that are trying to say, this is actually not a good situation. This is a bad situation.
Yeah.
Run.
You're in too deep. It's kind of like, all right, it's going to be either really bad or bad.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, okay, well, back to Parvati. So she writes that she faces an unwelcome independence at a young age. Basically, she and her sisters were left to fend for themselves as their parents devoted themselves to making their new life work. She writes, we were survivors, and survivors don't have time for fear, which I think is very true.
Ooh,
I know.
I got chills.
I know, it's good. That's a good line. A few years later, her little brother is born, and Parvati and her sister are tasked with being his babysitters, which she writes she resented with every fiber of her being, but she couldn't let herself be a burden to her parents after everything they did to save her. But Parvati is desperate to flee the chaos of her life. Of course, at this point, she can't, but soon, this will be one of the 4F tactics she utilizes again and again. Flight. Before we get to that, you came to America with your mother. You were 13. This was the first time that you guys were living like under the same roof since you were a child. Did you ever feel like I can't be a burden to her. Like she has saved me by bringing me to America.
Oh my God. Still to this day, it runs. It's somewhere in there again in my thoughts. Why am I doing this? I'm realizing, because I'm trying to prove myself, because I feel like I need to be worthy of the sacrifice that my mother made to get me to this country, the land of opportunity, where I should be able to be anything I want and be successful and be recognized and be blah, 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 whatever that means. It's never my mother putting those views on me. She's never asked me to be anything. She's never required anything. She's never really even suggested what her expectations are of me. The way Parvati grew up in survival mode is how I grew up. I think especially since moving even before when my parents left me and I felt like I was abandoned.
Yeah. All of a sudden, your grandmother, who had already raised a family, now has another.
She has to, yeah. So I just always felt like I don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
I remember even just the small, such random details, but I remember going out and we grew up poor. In Bulgaria, people didn't have a lot of money. So everything this is post-communist. Like people had, even when I was little, my grandparents had like coupons to get bread. Like you couldn't go to the store and buy 6 loaves of bread if you felt like it.
Yeah.
You only had a coupon to use.
And you talk about that in our Crying in the Bathroom episode, coming to the grocery store and being like, oh my God, you can just
buy anything you want
any time of the year. Yeah.
And so I remember feeling like I don't want to be a burden because my parents already abandoned me because I clearly was a burden to them. So I tried not to be a burden to my grandmother. And I remember her taking me down for not to ice cream, but we were walking down in the center of town and there was an ice cream little cart. And she asked me if I wanted ice cream and I refused the ice cream as a child. She was like, no, let me get you an ice cream. And I was like, no, I don't want any. I don't want any. I don't need any ice cream because I didn't want her to pay for the ice cream because then I would be a burden. And
and you remember that.
And I remember
You're there
that.
right now.
I'm there right now remembering that. And so I understand what Parvati is talking about when she just wants to there's no time. You're a survivor. There's no time to think about it at all and to do anything other than survive and have the plan and also just be small.
And for her, take care of 2 little siblings.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yikes.
Yeah. No, she's dealt with a lot. I mean, it's kind of remarkable that she has been able to recognize and is on the path of overcoming this towards the end of her memoir. Okay, let's dive into the 2 F's that I think Parvati seems to have really grappled with the most, as she's grown up and not working through her trauma at this point yet. But one of them is fawning, right? She writes, growing up in a community where we weren't allowed to have needs of our own, it came by fawning honestly. To be clear, you needn't grow up in a new age commune to develop a killer instinct for fawning. Anyone whose caretakers or childhood environment was unpredictable, emotionally negligent, or volatile can become a superstar fawner. This survival skill is potent and can be the quickest route to safety and power, especially for young people who are traditionally marginalized. And it's fawning that leads her on Survivor. She's actually first asked to come in for The Amazing Race by a friend in casting. In the casting process, she, quote, slaps on a smile and dials up the charm. I was the sunny, happy-go-lucky Southern cutie. My mask had been moving mountains for me since I started putting it on in my teenage years. But she's put in an uncomfortable position. She's brought 2 friends with her, and she's asked point blank in front of them both, who do you think you'd win with? And instead of refusing to answer, she's like, okay, I need to please this casting director. And she's just like, this friend. And of course, her other friend is pissed and hurt. She writes, I was cutthroat like a winner. So obviously this is way harsh, but it's a really clear example of someone living in survival mode without realizing it. Parvati is only looking out for herself here. She doesn't hesitate hurting someone that she loves in order to get ahead. But the network doesn't want her for Amazing Race. No, they loved that moment and they said, we have a different show for you. Have you heard of Survivor? Do you want to do it? And she's like, hell yeah. She writes, I didn't understand then that my spontaneous and casual yes would open the door to an adventure that would take me deep into my own shadow and change my life forever.
Amazing.
I know. Okay, so Survivor. Look, Dee and I have already established we're not
meant for it.
We're not
we're not built that way.
We also don't watch the show. I did watch the first few seasons when I was young. The show's been on for like 25 years now. Crazy. I did try to watch a couple of Parvati's episodes from this season that she won, just trying, because like when I posted that we were reading this book, I got people in my DMs being like, oh, I can't stand this girl. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating to me. I do try to pick women that I think ultimately are way more inspiring than not. And I was like, I got to figure out like why this woman rubs people such the wrong way. And of course, it was how she played the game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
the game that she
is the game, you know? But I thought that was really interesting. So I kind of wanted to check it out. And to be honest, I just couldn't continue watching that. I was just like, this show is not for me anymore at this point in my life. I'm turning on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which Parvati, I think she does actually mention Buffy at some point.
I can't remember, but I think you're right.
Yeah, I think she does. So I felt blessed to do that. But anyways, on Survivor, she has to fight and she learns betrayal. She writes, never had someone pretended to be my friend by day and then lied to me so brutally by night. No matter that it was a game, nothing had ever felt so real to me. And then she eventually gets back at this friend before getting voted off. And she writes that this moment changed her forever. She says, after all was said and done, I'd unearthed a broader emotional landscape within myself. In addition to being the happy-go-lucky girl I always knew myself to be, I found I could play with other, more intense feelings. Life had brought me lessons of betrayal, raging anger, and a loss of innocence. I'd also recognized my own strength and experienced my primal nature. Maybe I wasn't just a good girl after all. I was changed. So it is really fascinating, this thing that ultimately, it does seem like she is very grateful for her experiences on Survivor, even though she faces brutal condemnation, a lot of bad messages, people coming up to her face and saying like, your voice is annoying, you're annoying, I'm so glad you got voted off, all this stuff, right? Like it was really hard for her to come back to the real world after these shows and face the reputation, I guess, that the show had garnered her via editing or what have you, right? That's the other thing about every show needs villains, which literally she goes on villains versus favorites or heroes or whatever. And I think this is a really interesting thing for all of us to kind of just ponder. Experiences that feel really bad can sometimes be the key to unlocking a way better way forward. You know, like this experience made her get in touch with the darker parts of herself that were always there, that she like either stuffed down, couldn't face because she was in survival mode and needed to like be the happy girl that everybody loved. And it's because of her time on Survivor and then various things that happened because of it that I think she was able to get really honest with herself in a way that is really hard to do. And this made her do it. I mean, not right here. We still have a lot of ground to cover before Parvati starts really. But she starts, I guess at this point, she gives herself permission to not just be the good girl and kind of see what happens next. And then, of course, she faces some consequences from her actions and has to dig through a lot of shit, which we're about to get to. But I don't know. I thought that was really fascinating.
Very fascinating that she recognized this side of herself through this experience with this person who basically realized, that, oh my God, this is how this feels.
Yeah.
But also somebody can act this way and then completely turn around and act differently behind my back. I'm sure she realized she's capable of that.
Yeah.
Now that it just unlocked something for her. And she was like, oh, well, I could play that game. It feels like everything about her life was, if I act this way, I'm doing it to get this outcome. Like everything was very, not even, and I'm not saying that she did it very intentionally, but I think initially it's as a child, it started off as a survival mechanism. It's like, I'm going to act this way to get this outcome. Then I'm going to do this. And then later on through Survivor, she's learning, oh, but if I act this way, I can actually trick somebody to follow me and then I can stab them in the back.
Yeah.
She's realizing just the broader spectrum of manipulation tactics that you can use.
And she writes, I felt silly and weak over losing control of myself in the game. I didn't want anyone to have the power to hurt me, so I pushed down the anger. And she reflects that she was actually taught to handle anger this way. On the ranch, only the guru could be angry. She writes, her anger was a sign of strength, a show of her power over others. Everyone else had to suppress it. For us, not reacting was a sign of strength, which is just so fascinating. And I can't imagine, because her formative years were spent on the ranch. But those aren't like you're taking these things in, you're learning these things. But now if we see somebody acting a certain way, we have like our frontal lobe developed. Hopefully we're far enough in our life to be like, oh, they're acting that way because of this. But as a child, you take everything at face value. You don't understand that there's like something bigger going on or a bigger picture, or that it's even affecting you and the way you think about how to live your life or yourself.
You just follow the people around you. You do the thing that you do, which is, okay, blend in, do the thing. I just think it's so hypocritical and it's so funny to, going back to the beginning where you're like, how did people not realize that the two different sets of rules apply to this person and to us? Is because they assumed the bigger assumption. They're living their life by the assumption that she, Ma, is bigger than them, that she is greater than them, that she's above them in some ways. And that's the premise that they agree to. And that's why they follow a different set of rules, which is like, I don't know, I just feel like no one person is greater than another, right? And man, it's just so, from an outsider's perspective, you're like, this is so blatantly obvious.
I know.
That this person is manipulating these people just for their own greater good. And yet, here it is.
It is crazy to think about. I think any time that someone in a position of power tries to tell you that there's a certain way to live your life and they don't live that way, you've got to say, what the fuck, man? Like, no.
Yet these leaders, it's everything they're doing is out in the open. It's always a theater performance.
Yes. It's a performance.
So that you are like, oh, but like they're being transparent.
Right.
Right? And the manipulation is just happening before our eyes.
Yeah.
It's not.
They're magicians.
Yeah. It's just, Anyway.
Okay, back to Parvati. She writes that she had grown up with all of this and she feels like she followed the rules to be a good girl. She kept all of her aggressive, messy feelings contained to the appropriate time and place, which on the ranch, they actually gave them like Taekwondo classes, which I thought was really fascinating. She is realizing like Taekwondo is not working for me. So she turns to boxing. So interesting because you see her trying to feel her way through these new feelings and experiences, but she just doesn't have the vocabulary. She's not ready yet to actually come to terms with what it would really, how much it would really shake her life. But she's trying. She's like, all right, I'm angry. I don't really know what to do with this. I'm going to go box, which is really cool. Like at least she's not trying to just suppress it.
Yeah.
But she's giving herself a very controlled environment to feel angry in, which like that's not life. You just get angry sometimes and you're not in the boxing ring because of course you can't just will anger to go away. But she's developed coping mechanisms. Other coping mechanisms for Parvati were food, alcohol, and aggressive sex, which is really interesting too, because I think it's also a place where she feels like aggression and anger has a place that is welcomed in a way. Or is willingly giving up the power.
I
don't know. She doesn't really go into, later she'll go into
the power,
it.
Meaning is she, even if she decides to be submissive, it's a decision you're making. So you have control. It's controlled environments. But I actually think that's really healthy that she was able to look through these coping mechanisms, because that's how these coping mechanisms are how we realize what we need and what the channel of expression would be, right?
Yeah.
I think the boxing is genius. I mean, she clearly needed physically. She's a very physical woman.
She is. Yeah. She owns her body.
She needed this physical energy, this pain and suffering and trauma needed to exit her body in a physical way. And she really needed that to happen. And she talks about that in all these different ways. But I thought the boxing was a genius way to do that because it's like, it's controlled, but at the same time, you have to give yourself these outlets.
Completely agree. I think you need outlets, but I think you have to know why you're doing it.
Right.
And that's what she hasn't
figured that out. She's
at this point.
She's just getting it out until she can figure out why.
Exactly. She goes back to Survivor for a second time. She feels like her powers returned to her and they want her back. And she's like, yeah, I'll come. She details her time there and she has these epic moments of manipulation. And this is the game that she wins. But again, the show and the criticisms she faces because of how she played the game leave her wounded. And she's unable to cope with what she's feeling. She writes, I didn't have safe spaces or secure relationships built into my life during this time.
I want to give her a hug.
I know. She continues, I needed to do damage control around my public perception. Getting people to see me as a, quote, good girl and to approve of me again became my driving force. And again, that means bearing her anger deep down. She writes, I became trapped inside a vicious internal spiral of self-loathing. My self-hatred had a powerful effect on my choices. Instead of seeking out safe relationships that would have brought me back to a healthier state, I created emotionally destabilizing ones with aggressive, controlling men that provided me with the opportunity to play exciting power games. I felt helpless to prove I wasn't the awful, greedy, slutty person many believed me to be. I was confused, lost, and dead scared of people knowing the truth of how I felt about myself. I think we've all been there to a certain degree. I mean, being a woman is just a very complicated experience. Why is slutty a bad thing? Why is greedy a bad thing? We are human. We have human experiences. But on the flip side, being greedy is bad. You know what I mean? Like it just all is such like a confusing thing where I think as women, we are made to feel like we're supposed to fit into this tiny little box and not be disruptors or not have disruptive thoughts or feelings. And we do. Because we're human and people don't see it. Like, I feel like if a man had played the game the way that Parvati played in that second season, I don't think he would have been shamed the way that she was.
I think we just as women have different standards of perception that we're held to.
Yeah.
And that's what's really difficult is growing up and airing out your dirty laundry in some ways in front of an audience of the world. That's got to be really difficult. I mean, when I think about it now, I'd like to think that I don't care what people think. But the truth is, I am deeply affected what other people think. And so I can't even imagine, and I'm not a public person. I don't have hundreds of thousands of people knowing who I am and making comments on the internet about me or what I said or how I appeared. Imagine if you're trying to heal and figure out and like who you are, what your identity is, why you're a certain way, who you want to be, while playing this manipulative game, by the way, and you're trying to win, and there are rules, and you have to not always be perfect.
At the end, there's only one that can remain.
And then,
like
and then at the same time, be judged for it. And to your point, I don't think a male would be judged as harshly as a woman, but the world loves hating on women in power.
Yeah.
We've seen that. The world is afraid of women in power. And so they are made to be small. And the easiest way to make a woman small is shame her by calling her a slut.
Yeah.
Or telling her that she's using her sexuality to gain power and control when,
that's literally only been our option.
It's just our only option. Again, it's been our only option this far.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated relationship that women have with society and what the perception culturally that we have of women and what it means to be a good woman.
Yeah. A good girl.
A good girl. It's just so hard.
It is really hard. And then on top of that, her own childhood trauma where like she literally was raised to not feel, to have to bury down certain feelings that are so normal. I mean, I think like of my little ones right now who like, they get angry because they're kids and like one of them has a toy that the other one wants. And like, we help them realize that they are not their emotions and that emotions aren't bad and all this stuff, all these things that we're hopefully teaching them to be able to self-regulate and to live with their feelings and navigate life without letting their feelings control them. But then of course in Parvati's experience, we all know that like nothing goes away. You bury it down, you don't recognize it. Like it will explode. It will come out in all of these ways that she details in her memoir. This is her gift to us. She's like, I had to go through all of this. If I can keep anyone from having to go as far as I did, or if you're reading this and like you see any similarities in my experience, go inward, figure yourself out because it's worth it for you. You're worth it. So she goes back to Survivor for a third time as a villain in Villains versus Heroes, which has got to be like, you just won Survivor, but you're going back as a villain. I mean, you're already...
There's your label.
And she gets laid into by the other players. If you're not familiar with the way that it works, there's all the, I forget what the word is, where they all go, they have to like vote each other off.
Yeah.
What was that called? Dang it. And I watched this show a lot growing up, but tribal council.
The council.
You go to the council, you vote people out. There's alliances that are already formed. After someone gets voted out, guess at this point, people like say why they vote for you and she get voted out. Like you get that feedback. And she writes, as each jury member spoke, I felt myself shrink until I was so small, I was sure I disappeared. And she's frozen with shame. Basically, she's made to feel ashamed of how she played her winning season. And just before, on top of that, just before she left for this third round of Survivor, her brother was in a horrible skateboarding accident. And in fact, on day one of filming, she's looking over the producers because they told her that they would give her word if her brother comes out of surgery okay. But she writes that she didn't let anyone know because that, quote, kind of vulnerability is dangerous. That's an interesting phrase because I find myself agreeing with her, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Wish that vulnerability didn't seem dangerous.
Right. Vulnerability in a game like that would be dangerous because then people know what buttons to push.
True.
And where to hit you, where to stab you,
Yeah.
where the wound is so they can put salt in it.
But I do think that there is a sense in our society that vulnerability is dangerous as well. Like you're viewed as less than, which vulnerability and weakness feel like people try to tie those together, which I think is ridiculous. She writes, long after I came home, the memory of that final tribal council stuck in my body. I felt ashamed that I hadn't stood up for myself. I let them say all those terrible things about me and I just took it. Why didn't I tell them to fuck off? Why didn't I get up and walk out? A strong person would have done those things, I thought. I blamed myself. And this is our third F, freeze. She writes, we internalize the victim mentality and blame ourselves for the abuse we endure. Then we get stuck in a cycle of shame that begets more abuse, which begets more shame. The internal monologue goes something like this. Our problems aren't that big compared to other people's. What's wrong with me? I should be over this by now. A hard truth is that we can't just get over it when it comes to shame and trauma. Time does not heal all wounds. Shame breeds isolation, which doesn't lend itself to healing. We want to hide the thing we're most ashamed of. In my case, I felt rejected and unlovable, like a real loser. She continues, instead of allowing myself to feel and name my shame, question it, or reach out for support, my reaction to my low self-worth was to do more to prove that I was worthy of respect and love. I would be such a good person that no one could ever say anything to make me feel small again. I'd show those assholes I was a winner. I'd take my power back.
Cycles
I know.
of suffering.
But it's so great because she really does articulate this stuff in a way that, like, if you haven't thought about this before, it's all because it's based on her experience. I think it's more easily digestible for us to even like reflect on as we read it. We're like, oh, have I ever thought that thought too? Like, maybe I have. I wonder why. I wonder what that means.
Yeah.
Which is why I think women's memoirs can be a little bit more helpful than like self-help books.
You can apply these concepts to an actual situation, which is, I think, what memoirs offer, right?
Yeah.
You can see how her life played out and why she was this way and what she discovered from the situation. So it's a little easier. It's like, and an example of that was what I just showed, where you're right, in self-help books, which I love, you could just get lost a little bit in theory. And this is how, it's just words. And you're like, yeah, but how do I apply that? It just takes that little bit of an extra, what does that mean in my life, right?
Yeah. How does Parvati show everyone she's a good girl? Well, she takes $100,000 of her winnings and she starts a new business venture, a trendy wellness center. She writes, I poured myself into work so I wouldn't have to feel any pain from the last year. And she sells the business at a loss after 2 years and she has nothing left. She feels adrift, like a total failure. And she also starts feeling that for her that undeniable urge to have a baby. This is her new purpose. But she knows she doesn't want to do it alone, even though she prided herself on her fierce independence. And again, like, I thought that was such a refreshing. She was like, look, I think it's great if you want to have a baby on your own. I think I'm a very independent woman and I knew I didn't want to do it. And I was like, yes, I don't like, we're complicated. Where two thoughts exist at once. Like, we can want to be strong, independent women and we want to go home to our partner's arms at the end of the day. And like, that's all okay. It's all okay. Then she meets John, who seems to check all of her boxes, and she tells us her boxes, but he's not perfect. She starts detailing their relationship a little bit more, and you're like, did he check all your boxes? And she's like, I don't guess not. And she wants to break up with him, but then she goes to therapy, and she writes, I let myself be talked out of my concerns. And she has her child now, so I'm not like, I hate that for her.
She has a child with John.
She has a child with John. This is her daughter, Amma. But I'm just like, ooh, what therapist is her therapist, I felt from this section, was very much like, you are to blame for certain things in an unhealthy way. Like, look, I believe in accountability. I love accountability. I think we are to blame a lot when our relationships, like, it takes two to tango. It takes two to break up a relationship. We talked about this too in our Erica L. Sanchez episode. But I was like, I saw the red flags of this guy, and the fact that her therapist therapist was like, no, you're the red flag. And like, do you remember that part?
I'm just questioning this right now in this moment. Could the therapist have watched all the shows and known her image? Could the therapist have been influenced by the villain-esque, persona that she is in the world?
I mean, I would hope not, but I guess that's always a possibility.
Yeah, but aren't therapists just people?
I mean, it's true. But yeah, I guess there you go, guys. If you ever are on a reality show and you want to seek therapy, make sure your therapist has never seen you on the reality show.
I don't know. I do think we are complex human beings. And just because you're a therapist, it doesn't mean you're a good therapist.
No, that is true. And we've talked about that on the show too, how finding a therapist can be like speed dating. You do not have to settle for the first therapist who can fit you into their schedule. Definitely find someone who hears you. I don't think that this therapist was hearing Parvati.
It's like there are all these people who perceive her in a certain way, and then she falls right back into taking on the blame. It's like they know that they can utilize this image or these kind of insecurities she has as being the villain and being perceived as the villain. And they know that if they like lead her up to it.
That's who they expect her to be. So that's who she becomes.
Yeah. Yes.
And how do
the story of her life.
Yeah, the story. And do we fall into that too?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
That's why people are like, don't live up to your parents' expectations, live your own life. And it's like easier said than done. And it's not just our parents' expectations. We are constantly living the life of other people's expectations of us.
It's true. And I think that's why it's really important who you do spend your quality time with and develop those true friendships with and true relationships with people who uplift you, people who see the best in you, people who allow you to change. I think that's such a huge thing.
In her situation, in Parvati's situation, it's like she realized that she overlooked some red flags.
Well, she was told to overlook them a little bit by this damn therapist.
Absolutely. And then she allowed that to happen.
Right.
She internalized again. She fell into an old habit.
Yeah.
Which, again, it was a pattern that she was used to, that she fell into, and that's what led her on to continue that on. And once you have a child with somebody too, I mean, I'm sorry, but things get a little more complicated because you're not just thinking about yourself.
Right.
It's a little harder to just be like, you know what? I'm not feeling this anymore.
Well, plus she wanted a child. It behooved her for John to be that man.
Yeah.
She wanted a child at this point.
Yeah.
I read up on this stuff, like as I've worked through my own things that I've needed to work through, like our brains are like computers. They love patterns. They love the path least resistance. That's why change is hard, especially if it's breaking a bad habit. Your brain doesn't like that. You do have to actually do a lot of work to reprogram negative self-thoughts, negative self-doubts, all that stuff. And so there is a path of least resistance there. And you don't want to blame anyone for taking that path, but you also want more for people. That's all that it is. You want more for yourself, right? Hopefully.
So I just feel bad for her again, because at a therapist's office where she was vulnerable, she's not vulnerable in many places.
True.
And very often. And so this one place that she goes to be vulnerable feels like maybe didn't serve her. Again, vulnerability didn't serve her.
Right. Just sucks.
Forming another belief that isn't necessarily good.
There's an assumption that's made when someone is a professional in that regard. Like you give them your trust.
You give them power.
And John, to his credit, he does have wonderful moments of kindness and compassion. Like he joins her for her brother's intervention. Her brother had already had a problem with alcohol, and then he got addicted to the painkillers after his surgery. She writes, and on a deeper level, there was also a sense of safety and specialness I felt in being chosen by a man. If a smart, handsome, charming man thought I was good enough to be his one and only girlfriend and wanted to claim me in front of his family and friends, that meant I must be lovable, right? It certainly proved I had some kind of value that others could see. And we know that, she's felt like she hasn't had value because of the reaction from the world after her being on Survivor. Parvati details a lot more about their relationship and the ways that she ignored her instincts because she wanted to be loved and wanted a baby, like we said. They do eventually marry, and she welcomes her daughter Amma into the world. I also love the story of Amma's name. So I'm just kind of paraphrasing here because I didn't write it down, but it has stuck with me. So I want to bring it up. The Amma were these Japanese women who would dive for oysters.
Free dive,
right? They would free dive for like pearls or oysters, and they would train themselves to hold their breath for a very significant length of time so that they could dive deep down to the ocean. And they're basically our closest thing to mermaids.
I know.
And
that was so beautiful.
Parvati picked that name, and I was like, that's a good name.
That's a good name. Love a good story of a name.
I love a good name story. So she writes, survival in pregnancy was all about the baby. And for her to thrive, I'd have to kill the person I was before. I mourned the loss of the single girl who flitted off to faraway countries without a second thought, who could drink coffee or wine all day without guilt or fear. None of this was me anymore and might never be me again. So while this baby grew inside me, I let my old self dissolve. I thought that was really fascinating. That wasn't necessarily my experience when I got pregnant. I wanted to know, was that yours?
No.
Yeah.
I think
she had so much self-hatred for who she was or felt that she was bad that she like
having this baby grow in her gave her that reason to be almost like when the guy chose her. It's like, well, the baby's growing in me and that's the good part.
Yeah.
And so she allowed herself to be for the baby to make her good. Like the baby's rubbing off on me. So I'm good because I'm carrying the baby. It's like, but how amazing, but how beautiful for her to have that throughout her pregnancy.
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience. My transformation was much bigger after having my babies. It was always kind of the aftermath of the pregnancy when they were actual babies and I had to take care of them. But that's when my identity shift really happened. But the way she describes what it's like to have a child, to bring a child into your life and be the parent, be the responsible one. And I mean, a lot of that I related to.
Earlier this season, we did an episode on Alua Arthur's Briefly, Perfectly Human. She's a death doula, and she writes about the many deaths that we actually experience throughout our life. And one of them, for me, was like the death of the single woman, the death of the non-mothered Alex, right?
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you. Is there one thing from your old self, like pre-mom self, that you really miss about you? Maybe it's about your life, but maybe it's the way about how you lived your life or who you were, like a characteristic of you that played out in your life more than now.
The lack of responsibility. I will be honest, I miss that. Having 2 kids, running a household, kids who are in activities or at school, like there's always something to remember to do. I miss days where I didn't have to remember to do something. That's really all that it is. Like, I don't mind it now. I can't just turn my brain off anymore. There's always something that, whether it's milk or diapers or toothpaste or the choir concert
or school project.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's just
or a doctor's appointment.
Never ends. Yeah. And before kids, there were definitely days where it didn't matter what day it was. Nothing really needed to be done. That felt so important, I guess. What about you?
Almost like reinvent myself in ways and like take risks with like who I am or what I do or where I go or just sort of, spontaneity of activities and things like that. I don't even know what specifically, but now I just feel like this is who I am. I have to be this stable human being. I don't know. It's just, there's more weight on choosing how to be a good role model and choosing the activities I do and really what are my priorities. I have to be a lot more intentional with that as opposed to experimental.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, anyway, we got to figure out a good memoir for that. That's a whole other topic. Okay, so Ama is born and John just continues to not be the support system that she needs. At this point, he has no job. He had lost his job that he had when they got together. He refuses to get one. She's like, could you even drive Uber? And he's like, no, that's beneath me. So Parvati has to do it all. Take care of Amma, take care of the house, take care of John, make the money. And she writes that she knows something was off, but it didn't feel like postpartum depression. She writes, I was hyperactive, hypervigilant. My survival instincts kicked in and I leaned back on my old strategy, disconnect from hard feelings and just muscle through the pain. I may not have known entirely how to mother, but I definitely knew how to survive. And those first few months feel like survival. And she has all this shit on top of it. Like I felt like I was surviving and I had a very present partner and other people show up in my life. Like I couldn't imagine her experience. And a couple of years later, she'll actually have a conversation with another mother. She writes about just like crossing paths with this woman who's like, oh yeah, I had postpartum anxiety. And Parvati's like, that's what I had. Women talking to women, very helpful. She writes, it's hard to survive something you can't define. In naming the thing that had been controlling me, causing me to act in ways I didn't recognize or like, I regained some power. It was such a relief to hear that other new moms had the same experience as I did, and they had made it out on the other side. This is something that we've echoed in our personal lives and even on the show. It's literally why we do this, so that, if one person feels understood or seen or heard from one episode that I do, then
You've done your job.
I've done my job. So when her daughter is just a few months old, she decides to go back on Survivor because they need the money. This experience and coming back after it pushed her to the edge of herself. But she forces the negative feelings, the anger down, and she just keeps going, keeps going. Her marriage isn't working, and then the world shuts down. This is a pandemic, and she starts connecting with a man online. She writes, I didn't realize I'd completely numbed myself to fit into the confines of my marriage until I started engaging with Lumberjack. That's what she calls this man. Meanwhile, people are binging on Survivor because there's nothing else to watch. And it's pretty cathartic to watch the show during a pandemic, right? And she has a new wave of fans. And this time, they love her. Her husband, so she's buoyed by this, right? Her husband, John, discovers her affair and she throws herself into repairing this marriage. She writes, I told myself if I worked hard enough, I could survive this period of loneliness too. So she is seeing life as not something to live at this point, but something to merely survive. And I think we can all relate to that at certain points in our life. You know, I feel mixed, right? Like, I do feel like marriage is a commitment and you should do the work that it takes. But if your partner is not doing the work too, I don't know, there's only so much you can really like.
Yeah, I think both have to do the work.
Yeah.
I think she probably felt like she needed to do the repair because of the affair.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a physical affair, was it? It was
No,
just
it was just online.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, because he lived across the country or something.
It still is, and I understand that. But yeah, it's complicated.
We all live in the gray. So then the worst happens to her. Her little brother dies from an accidental overdose. And when her husband, John, doesn't show up for her emotionally, she realizes that is her breaking point and she wants to get out of her marriage. It gets complicated though, because right after that, John is actually diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
Which I thought was such a bizarre thing.
That was like, if this were in a movie, you would be like, too far. The screenwriters took it too far.
I would be like, that's not real.
It's not real.
They wouldn't do that. They're now just manufacturing just too much.
Yes. She writes, the whole ordeal felt like whiplash. It had only been 2 months since my brother's death, and here I was back again, suspended in a state of survival. I didn't want to stay in my marriage, but I didn't want my husband to die either. I'm okay. I've got this, I repeated.
Oh my God.
Going back to my mantra. She starts to realize, though, that there must be something beyond surviving. She allows herself to grieve. Her brother's death is kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and she realizes, oh my God, I have a lot more to grieve. She grieves her marriage, the subsequent custody change. Now she doesn't have a ma every day. Her life. She gave herself a safe space to feel, and she writes that the tears just poured out of her. The sadness from years of hurting and suppressing her grief. And she knows she needs to make a big change. She writes, grief widened my ability to access love and acceptance. The process of feeling the pain of my losses cleaned me out, destroyed old, outmodeled ways of behaving, and paved a path to a completely new power source for me. I was ready to love. Why do you think it's so hard for us to allow ourselves to grieve? Now, this is a big question. I'm so sorry. I didn't put this in my outline. You're like, oh my gosh.
That's okay. That's okay. You have to sit in pain.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It's lonely. Our survival mechanism is telling us not to do that. It's telling us just keep moving on. Just, sweep it under the rug. Push through. This is going to just slow you down. It's going to make you vulnerable. And so from a survival perspective, I think maybe we don't want to stop and put everything on pause to grieve. It feels like a pause, right?
We don't model grief for each other. We don't teach our children to grieve. We do kind of do that. It's okay. Like, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
Yeah. Oh my
God,
you're
cry out
right.
loud. That song, And I just wonder, like, maybe that's not the right path forward. So back to Parvati, she writes that, like, she's been using different methods throughout the memoir, which I thought was really fascinating. We talked about the wellness treatment center that she started. Like, she's very into yoga and massage and boxing, like we said. But it's funny because it's like when you think, oh, someone who does yoga all the time must have their life figured out. Like, they must allow themselves to feel all the things they need to feel. And it's like, well, not necessarily, right? She goes beyond that finally. And she realizes that, like, maybe they were Band-Aids or temporary fixes, but she starts working on reprogramming her brain and acknowledging that it needs to be reprogrammed. She writes, I focused on healing like it was my full-time job. And she shares all these methods, and some of them, they're a little fun and a little out there, but they're cool if you want to check them out. I mean, she tries somatic therapy, craniosacral therapy, acupuncture, rolfing, a form of specific deep tissue massage that helps relieve stress patterns from the fascia or connective tissue, holotropic breath work, which is a practice in yoga nidra, a form of meditation that involves deep rest, past. And it seems that somatic therapy is what's really helpful for her. It's a form of alternative therapy aimed at treating trauma and stress-related disorders. This, coupled with a book recommended to her, Existential Kink, helped her realize that, quote, instead of judging myself or any of my preferred sexual behavior as wrong or bad, my truth was I was breaking free from the old conditioning that taught me desire was selfish and wrong. I wanted more, and that was a good thing. I needed to honor all the parts of myself, the slutty, greedy parts alongside the generous, good girl parts. There you go. Yep. So throughout the rest of the book, Parvati details her dating experiences, falling in love with a woman, and how this delighted and surprised Parvati about herself in the best way. She finally feels comfortable being vulnerable with another person and confident that vulnerability won't be used against her. And she finally trusts her own ability to make the right decisions for herself. She writes, I found space to expand my definition of who I was. My whole world was widening alongside my heart. In survival mode, our minds narrowed to focus on the thing that will give us the best chance to stay alive. We could begin to operate in either or, becoming rigid in our mindset and fixated on categorizing things into good versus bad, right versus wrong, black versus white, so we can feel a sense of control and safety in an unsafe world. I was starting to learn that while survival mode might be either / or, the soul is nurtured by yes/and. I've begun to embrace a new and powerful question. What if everything, the good, the bad, the high, the low, was all okay? Yeah. And this new ideology is tested when she's asked to participate in season 2 of The Traitors. That's where I learned about her. And she passes this test. She stays true to who she's learned she is/can be. And people responded positively to her. She writes, I hadn't come close to winning, but none of that mattered. I felt victorious.
So nice girls don't win.
Well, let's see. So my biggest takeaway from her healing journey is that at the heart of it, she learned to view herself with curiosity instead of judgment. And she learned to trust herself. I mean, going from this commune cult, the ranch, where like everybody put their faith in Ma, and then through her life, you kind of see her like kind of let other people make decisions for her, the therapist with John.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, she's like, wait, what do I want? Who do I want to be? Who am I? And is that okay? Yes, it is. It's not easy to sit with yourself, open yourself up, however you're able to do that. But the peace that Parvati seems to have found, or the path towards that peace at the end of her memoir, is the beautiful place that I want us all to be. And like, she's not trying to be perfect. It's not tied up in a bow at the end.
Yeah.
The relationship that she writes about, they're not together today.
Yeah.
But she just seems to be so much more accepting of herself.
It just makes me think it's a journey, right? I don't think it ever ends until we die.
I mean, that's kind of the point of life, right? Is to keep growing, evolving, changing. You have to because things will happen to you and you can't.
It's exhausting.
I think it's more exhausting trying to stay firm in one place than at least, right? Like imagine I don't know, have you guys ever stood in the ocean and like waves are crashing onto you? Standing still and not letting the wave push you over is way harder than letting the wave push you over and stand back up.
Yeah. You have to go with the wave.
Yeah.
I love that. That's such a good visual.
That just came to me.
Wow.
You bring out the best in me. I'm telling you.
Write that down. You've had like a couple. I don't remember the previous one.
Luckily, they're recorded.
Good. But you gotta write those down. Those are quotes from you.
That's when one day I write my own memoir about all of the lessons I've learned from all these other women's memoirs.
There you go. Those quotes need to be in it. The only constant is change, right? Is that you're going to continue to evolve and change. And that's all. And the sooner you accept that, it's kind of my takeaway, right? Is you also, there's no shortcuts. Mm-hmm. If you look at her life, I mean, it was a journey. She had to go through all of these things and through the ups and downs in order to be where she is. There's no shortcut of, I just want to be there already. You know,
you have to do the work.
You have to do it. And you know what? Ultimately, even though you're right, she doesn't win on Traitors, which I was joking when I said so nice girls don't win. But she does end up winning. I guess it's redefining what does winning mean. If you're playing this game and that's what is important, that's one thing. But if you're playing the game of life, it's redefining what that final win is for you. I think she does win. She finds out how to be more herself, her authentic self.
And I think it's defining what nice is to you. There is a difference between nice and kind, but I would consider myself a nice person. I try to do things the nice way. I enjoy. I don't think I disown the shadow self. Like I think I am pretty cool with her most of the time. There's parts of her that get a little too loud. Sometimes I need to be like, shush, shadow self, like you being too defensive right now or whatever. But I would consider myself a nice girl, and I'd like to think that nice girls can win.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be the manipulative her title in itself is such an interesting talking point.
Yeah.
Parvati writes this: I know for certain now I don't have to be good. I don't have to be nice. I don't have to be liked. I only have to continue to let the soft animal of my body love what it loves. And this is a callback to a quote from a Mary Oliver poem. Mary Oliver pops up a lot in these memoirs as well. I wanted to include that because that's the conclusion that she's come to. And I think there is a freedom in just allowing yourself to be who you are and not have to put on this these niceties or be quote unquote good. I think there's an even bigger freedom in redefining what those words mean to you so that you're not even using them as labels you don't want to label yourself as. Mm-hmm. I think coming back to love is always a good thing too.
It's challenging to pause and recognize when you are putting on a mask or pretending to be something. Because sometimes these actions we take, or these behaviors and actions are such a part of us that we don't realize it's a pretense, right?
Yeah, it's your coping mechanism.
I love the concept of every day I think I work toward recognizing thoughts and feelings that come up and saying, I love myself. I'm feeling this way because of this and this, but that's not true. It's like being able to talk to yourself and catch these little moments before they become bigger, right? And before they take over. Take over. But yeah, I think that would be the ultimate win, is just feel love for yourself and a sense of peace with yourself and be comfortable in your own skin, but also in any room with anyone, right? Because the moment our environments change, you go into a room with, let's say, a bunch of writers you admire or something, then you put on a mask, right? You're like, ooh, I have to seem this way.
Intellectual,
or I want
aloof.
them to know, or I want them to know this, or da-da-da-da, right? It's so easy to fall into these personas that we can put on because we want to be liked. Because it's always about who we are as women and how the outside world defines us, right? We want to live up to these expectations of the world. We want to be accepted, which is why her story is so interesting, because she
was so unliked.
She was so unliked, and because she had to heal, her healing journey was just on display. It's really, really cool.
At the end of the day, I think at the core of her memoir, she started finding validation from herself and not other people. And that is always something that I'm striving for and that I can get behind. And that's something that I try to instill in my daughter, because it is so easy to measure your worth and your value based on what other people tell you about yourself. At the end of the day, you only go home with yourself and you only look at yourself in the mirror, and you have to be proud of the life that you lived, because people will come and go. Experiences will come and go. I'm curious if anyone out there has changed their mind about Parvati after reading her memoir or listening to our episode on her. Slide into Babes in Bookland pod on Instagram's DMs. I love me a good DM slide. I love that she was so vulnerable with us and honest. She didn't hold herself back. She exposed her shadow side. She let us in on her existential kinks. And she said, this is who I am. The good, the bad, the ugly. I'm not nice. I'm me. I'm Parvati. Here I am. She's living her best life now. All right, what about you? Thank you, Diliana, so much for inviting me into your home to have this conversation with you.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. This was a great chat.
Bye.
Bye.
And thank you all so much for listening today. If you'd like to further support the show, the easiest way to do that is to rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. You can also subscribe on Apple Podcasts for bonus content and extended episodes, or find us on Patreon. We also have some pretty cute merch at our TeePublic site. All of those links can be found in our Instagram bio at Babes in Bookland Pod. Next week is a bite-sized Babes episode. I'm finally doing it. We're talking about Belle Burden's Strangers. I promise to bring you some interesting hot takes and hopefully something new to the conversation that has been ongoing about this best-selling memoir. Until then, take care.